Welcome to The Strategic Leader, the podcast for people-focused leaders who want to think, act and feel more strategic. I'm Gemma Bullivant.
And I'm Fee Craig. In this series, we're tackling the big, hairy questions shaping the world of work and exploring how to respond with strategic clarity, not just strong opinions. Welcome to The Strategic Leader. And welcome specifically to Series 4, where we are tackling big, hairy, audacious strategic questions. So let's dive straight in. Performance ratings. Do they help us get better, or do they make things worse? In today's episode, we're diving into a question that can frustrate managers, it can divide HR, it shapes the way people experience work. Are performance ratings still fit for purpose? Or is it time to let them go? And if we do let them go, what on earth do we replace them with? I'm delighted to welcome our very first guest to the Strategic Leader podcast. Anna, very warm welcome to you. Would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
I would, and thank you so much I love being your first guest. My name is Anna Rasmussen. I'm the founder and CEO of OpenBlend. OpenBlend is a performance management platform that addresses performance management through transforming one-to-ones between a manager and their employee. And when I say one-to-one, I mean any kind of interaction between a manager and employees. It could be a check-in, it could be that annual review, and everything in between.
Welcome, Anna. That's wonderful to have you with us. And it's so interesting to hear what you say. It's not just the review, it's all of those conversations. Gem, I've always wanted to say this. Over to you, Rory, for a quick explainer.
I am going to do a quick explainer. Hi, everyone. I think we do need a quick explainer on the whole performance ratings thing, because why are we even talking about performance ratings? Well, to my mind, what I've observed is that in the last 10 or 15 years, companies have started to really question those traditional performance appraisal systems. And actually quite a few big players made some pretty bold moves. I'd say sort of 10 or 15 years ago, Adobe abolished its annual performance reviews. Microsoft, Gap, Accenture, they've moved away from traditional performance evaluations. And they started the charge, really, as far as I could tell, but I'm sure Anna will give us a bit more insight in a minute, about the need for more continuous development-focused feedback systems. And some of these shifts have really caused us to question how best to approach performance measurement, and especially ratings. And ratings has gone through the mill a little bit. My take on this, let's call it my opinion, is that I get it, that ratings are not ideal. There's a lot to be said for how negatively ratings can land in the whole performance equation. But as you know, I specialise in pay and reward, and removing ratings can really put pressure on connecting pay with performance, which is something a lot of companies want to do. So I think it's a really important question for us to navigate, because if we really are passionate as an organisation to have some form of performance related pay, if we don't have ratings, what do we have? So that's a big question for me that remains unanswered, and hopefully we can explore that a little bit more as we go through this conversation.
Well, Gem, I'm really glad you said my take on this, let's call it an opinion, because if you remember last time we talked about a really basic model to use when it comes to these big, hairy strategic questions, which is firstly just to recognise what our own opinion is and recognise, am I coming to this with some sort of entrenched opinion? And I think I am. It's informed by nothing other than the experience that I have been through in employment, particularly working for a big corporate, which I think has left us sort of a scar, which has now become my opinion. So let's see if I can open up my entrenched view of this by hearing some alternative ways to tackle this. So Anna, you've spent over a decade working with HR leaders across a wide range of businesses and sectors. So just tell us a little bit more about where you work in this space.
So we specialise in mid-sized organisations. So our largest customer is up to about 5,000 employees. And we support organisations in their performance culture And we have had to build a very flexible product because everyone's performance culture is different, quite rightly, because it needs to suit the sort of the ebbs and flows of their organization. So in the product, we have 8 modules. One of those modules is called Evaluate, and that is where the rating sits, if you like. So you don't have to have a rating. You can evaluate an end of year without a rating, or you can have it with a rating. And then that can link into payroll, etc. But then we also have performance and feedback and development modules, as well as motivation and well-being. So we kind of look at all of the subjects that should be within an ongoing performance conversation, and then we have Evaluate, which is the module that you can kick in at half year or end of year.
So what I'm hearing there then is evaluate the actual rating, the evaluation is just one part of a whole bunch
Yes.
of things that should be there,
Yes.
across the year to get you to a point of optimizing performances. Like that's just one thing. It's not the sole focus of it. Would that be?
No, absolutely. And then the way that we communicate with our customers is that actually, what you want to be doing is getting to the end of the year and everybody achieving very good ratings. I agree with what you said at the beginning. Interestingly, a vast proportion of our customers have ratings, but they aren't linked to pay. They're used in lots of different ways. So, but ultimately, our customers invest in Open Blend because they want to drive performance throughout their organization that maximizes the chances of all individuals getting a higher rating. So it's much more about driving performance as opposed to measuring it without driving it.
So that's really important, isn't it? Thinking about this strategically, thinking, well, why do we even have any kind of performance rating at all? Our objective is to drive performance, not to have a performance rating system. That's
Yes.
it's a means to an end.
And I've seen that trend across our customers. We've been up and running for 10 years. So, we've seen a trend in that and in how Evaluate, appraisals, ratings are used in organizations. And some of our customers are very progressive. Some of them are a bit more old school. So I think we've got a very clear view across all different types of organizations, is that I think ratings, they went very out of fashion, but I think they're becoming more popular again now. But I think they're becoming more popular again for different reasons. I think businesses, times are quite hard, and I think businesses really want to drive performance. It's not about measuring performance anymore. They need to be driving performance through their organizations, and ratings are being explored as a way to achieve that, potentially in the absence of managers not being able to do it in their day to day.
Oh, that's a really interesting one, isn't it? So what you mentioned earlier on about all those different other elements, feedback, all those conversations that are going on throughout the year, well-being and so on. Is that something, do you think sometimes the performance rating is like a sort of dumping ground at the end of the year to make up for not having sufficient management support throughout the year?
Look, I think there's pros and cons to it. I think it's quite useful with today's workforce to have a moment in time that emphasizes what they are at work for. We should be talking about well-being. You should be talking about an individual's motivational drivers. You should have coaching-led conversations and meet that person in their world. And it's all about meeting the employee where they are. But ultimately, that employee is there to deliver against their objectives. So I think having that rating in place, or an end of year moment in time, is a good reminder that your performance is going to be viewed. But that in its own on its own is not good enough. It has to be, we're driving you to get there, and then we're going to review it. So the two need to come together, in my opinion.
So first up, it's quite interesting to me to hear that there are lots of companies out there that have ratings but don't connect it, or perhaps even intend to connect it in some way to pay. I'm really curious about the ones who have no ratings at all and how they decide on pay, but that's probably a conversation for another time. But if we were to boil it down to some basic pros and cons, let's start first with where ratings might add value.
I would say that we have more customers that have ratings that aren't related to pay than we do that are related to pay.
I must admit, I'm surprised from my entrenched opinion. That does surprise me.
Yes.
That's really interesting. Go on.
I think they use them to just quite generally. I mean, every organization is different, but the sort of high level, I think organizations use them to inform promotion.
Yes.
They use them as targets. And this is the bit that I actually think that ratings, and it doesn't need to be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In OpenBlend, you can rename the ratings. So, we've got people that are like on track, way off, smashing it. They rename them so they're softer kind of ratings, if you like. And I think they're a really useful conversation point. So, my background's coaching. And the reason that OpenBlend came about, it enables two people to sit and have a conversation about what they mean by that and explore the kind of what that means. So I think that is a plus of a rating. That it is a conversation point. It's a meeting of two people that are coming in and exploring where that's been rated. Now we also have, and the majority of our customers do this as well, is that we have the employee rates themselves as well as the manager rating themselves. So very often you'll have a discrepancy in what they say. So one might
Yes.
say a 2 and the other one might say a 3, or one might say on track and the other one might say smashing it. Remember, this is a moment in time. It's to review it, to see what we're going to do for going into the year ahead. So I think it's great. It's a language that I think all parties understand. If it's part of the culture and something that's always there, it's a common language, which I think is beneficial. As I mentioned before, it's a reminder what people are there to do. I think sometimes it makes it easier for managers. I'm always pro things that make it easier for managers to have a good conversation. I think it makes it easier for managers when it's linked to feedback. But we can talk about that separately if you want. And if done well, and this goes back to the point you made at the beginning, if done well, it removes bias. If
Yes.
if it isn't done well,
Yeah.
it promotes it. So that can sit right on the fence of adding value or not adding value, I think.
I have a memory of sitting in a board around a boardroom table, passionately defending all 5 members of my team who were performing at different levels, but I was absolutely gunning for them all to get exceptional or whatever it was,
Mm.
just because it felt like a sort of personal loyalty thing. And, when I look back on that now, I think that, we can't all do that. It can't be right. So yeah, that if done well, I wasn't doing it well at that point for sure. I
I
can
think the if done well point is obviously a critical one here. And I have this suspicion that the criticism of ratings has somewhat been as a result of the fact that these appraisals, to use that traditional language, has always been like one time a year, that it
Mm.
happens at, so retrospectively, probably comes as a bit of a surprise, feels even harder to explore and defend and get to the right rating as a result of that conversation, where actually it's not the rating that's the problem, it's the fact that you're not having regular check-ins, regular touch points, and in a timely way against what it is that you're talking about. So this delayed approach, I think, has then in some way it's transferred the to the detriment of what ratings are there to do. That little suspicion I have, does that
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I can't remember what happened last week, let alone 5 people, and then trying to remember what happened at the beginning of the year when you're doing this at the end of the year. I think it's vastly unfair on everybody to try. So, absolutely, Gemma, to your point, it's really important to have those ongoing conversations. But when you're doing the rating and the review, you need to really easily be able to access all of those conversations as well. So, in the moment, you're sitting there and thinking, right, I've got to do this review for this individual. I've got to give a rating for that. What do I need to support this in this exercise that I'm doing now? So in the tool, we have something called Snapshot, which takes the manager into all the other parts. They're in a really easy to view layout, all the objectives they've been working on, all the actions, all their feedback, all their development plan, whatever modules they have switched on, they've got access to that and they can see progress in that and they can see what's been signed off, what hasn't been signed off, what they've struggled with, all the rest of it. So it informs them to then sit and do that review at the end of the year. Now, if you're not having those ongoing conversations, you're not capturing those ongoing conversations, how are you supposed to do it at the end of the year? And I think that's the bit where it really falls down.
So I really like what you said earlier on about it being a target to kind of know, throughout the year, I'm currently tracking here and this is how I feel I'm doing. And this is how my manager or perhaps my manager aggregating all kinds of feedback, other people think I'm doing. And those two things may or may not be the same thing. So if I'm not happy with how I'm showing up or how other people are perceiving me, I can do something about it as the year goes on.
Yeah.
I can work out, okay, what do I need to do to change? What do I need to improve my performance? Or what do I need to tackle? That idea about it, tracking it throughout the year with those really good quality conversations feels much more meaningful than, I guess, where I was coming from, which perhaps is a bit old school, which is you sort of wait until the end of the year and then this label descends upon you. I guess full disclosure, I've never had a bad one. But it just feels a bit arbitrary. It just feels like it's sort of dished out at the end of the year and there's nothing you can do about it. So I guess what you're describing is a much more sort of front-loaded conversation, isn't it?
It is front-loaded, and I think that what you've just described, and we track ongoing progress around performance. But I think what you've just described there is really empowering, actually, for the employee. Imagine if we could make ratings empowering, wouldn't that be cool? And I get it's just when you're saying that, then I think there's something that maybe we haven't looked at before, is that ratings could be empowering for individuals because they feel like they're in the driving seat towards what they're on track to do, in which case that would need a mid-year.
Yes.
So you have your ongoing one-to-ones, you have a mid-year review where what you're on track for, and then you close it off at the end of the year, which some of our customers do mid-year as well.
I suppose one of the great things about having a platform like yours, Anna, Open Blend, is just the having one place to keep all of this in, so that if you do have those regular touch points, which we should be doing, they are actually kept somewhere and they're not buried in a manager or employee's notebook or personal files, but they're on a sort of a shared platform. And I really do feel like this whole question of ratings being bad has got the shadow of this not quite getting the right kind of frame, the right context. You described targets and tracking against a target. We may not all be striving to knock it out of the park or can't remember what you said now. I love that
On
language.
track.
Smashing it.
Smashing it out of the park. But there's, some really helpful language in there and empowering employees, but also you referred to this earlier, empowering the managers, helping managers actually have better conversations. And I think before we close, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that because I know you're really passionate about manager
I am.
capability in this space. So tell us some of your observations and some of the things you've developed as a result of this that you think really helps and enables managers to operate effectively with performance ratings or performance conversations generally.
Yeah, well, I think, Open Blend, I didn't set out to set up Open Blend to be what it is today, actually. I am a coach, and I used to spend 50% of my time going into organizations and training groups of people managers how to use coaching techniques to drive better conversations at work. And we've very much focused on sort of the mindset of one-to-ones and the skill set for one-to-ones. But I just saw this big pattern at the end of any of these sessions that I did with the managers, said, have you got something that I can use on the job? Which is why Open Blend came from originally, so that managers could have the mindset, the skill set, and then the tool set to help them have those conversations. So you're right, Gemma, I'm hugely passionate about supporting managers to have better conversations. And I think, God, like anything, one size doesn't fit all. Every manager is different in different sectors, different numbers of employees. They work in organizations that afford them time to sit down and have one-to-ones, and others that where it's not recognized as a good use of time. So, it's such a broad spectrum that we're working with managers. But I think every organization we work with, one of the problems that we try and solve for them, or something that we look at success plans, whether we're measuring, is the confidence and capability of their managers to have better conversations. Now we support this, and the managers can lean into this more or less depending on where they sit. But we use the GROW model, very, very straightforward. So, what's your goal? What's the reality? What are the options or your obstacles, depending on which module we're looking at, or what's the way forward from that? So, supporting managers through what we call a discuss journey, so that they're actually having those conversations, building that capability and confidence. But let's be honest about that. The more managers are having those structured, useful, valuable conversations, then more they're building trust. They understand those individuals to a greater level, and they're going to be in a much better position to do an end of year rating if that's what they need to do anyway, because they totally understand it. And they're touching on subjects like what motivates that individual, what their development plans are, where they see themselves. If we've got something called a development mission, so they can choose their development mission. So powerful for a manager to understand where that individual wants to go. And all of that is going to drive that kind of rapport and drive that performance to ultimately conclude in that person getting a better rating. So I think ratings are ridiculous as a standalone exercise. At the end of a year, because I believe very much performance management starts on the day the employee does. If you're capturing the year that's been and reviewing that, learning from it, and then setting out the year ahead, I think ratings are brilliant. Without that, and in a moment in time, yeah, they're fundamentally flawed, I think.
So Fee, as our self-declared rating skeptic from the start, based
Right.
on your own experience, could you imagine yourself being a little more open-minded or optimistic, or of a slightly different viewpoint if you were back in that situation again, where you had a team of 5 and you needed to undertake ratings for them?
I think I absolutely would, by thinking about this perspective that it can empower the individuals. I mean, everything you've
Mm,
discussed, everything you've described sounds so appealing to me, both as, back in the day when I was managing people, but also now when I'm looking at organizations and I guess what it makes me think is, the question, what do we do about our performance ratings, is not really the question. The question is, how do we support the performance of our people? And everything
yeah.
else you've described, how do you have those conversations, is really the question. Because what you
Mm.
said about, what did you say? Toolset,
Mindset, skill set, tool set.
toolset, brilliant. Because even just guiding people through that one-to-one conversation, how often are those one-to-one conversations purely operational? How often are those one-to-ones the manager telling the individual
Mm,
something, maybe telling them what feedback they've got for them? It's
yeah.
unskilled, it's unhelpful. And it doesn't surprise me if that's happening, that you get a performance rating at the end of the year and it doesn't help, it can harm. So
Yes.
everything you've described about the journey towards that performance rating, if that
Mm,
was in place, I would absolutely support it. So yeah,
yeah.
you've definitely kind of opened my eyes to an alternative way to get there. It's not the ratings themselves that's the problem. It's
Yeah.
what happens every other day of the year in the
Yeah.
lead up to that label being issued. I think that's probably the more critical thing to be
Yeah.
thinking about, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is Gemma has coined this term. I'm not going to take it, but I love it. The performance conversation design. I think thinking about the performance conversation design, how is that from the day they start to those key moments in time? How does that whole thing need to look for your organization that actually make ratings a driving force and empower people and drive performance forward? Yeah.
And do you have any hot tips for that good performance conversation design? What have you noticed that works pretty well in practice if people are keen to apply some good principles?
Well, we relate it to the employee journey. So we look at sort of onboarding. So performance management starts the day the employee does. We look at onboarding. So setting goals, clear deliverables, expectations right from the outset. Then continual performance conversations where you're not just looking at what they've done, but you're looking at their motivation, removing obstacles to move forward. I think feedback is a really important thing. We support formal and informal feedback, making sure that people are self-aware of their strengths and development areas. And, going back to the point that we're making then about whether you're on track or not, feedback can be a really powerful tool to help people see whether they're on track or not. Investing in development to enhance against predetermined competencies or skills or behaviors, so how people are tracking against that. And then once you've got all of those, I don't want this to sound complicated, but when you've got all those balls in the air, that's when people are going to be performing at their best anyway. And then when you get to those moments in time, whether it be mid-year or end of year, whatever, you measure where they are and reward them, whether it just be in a word or with pay or a pay rise or a promotion or whatever it might be, in a fair way, because you've tracked all those kind of conversations that you've had before. So I think linking it into the employee journey, and that will look different for different organizations, right? But I think, that performance conversation design throughout the employee journey that's unique to your organization would be a place to start. And then ensuring that you're investing in conversations around development and that they're developing in a way that they want to develop. And then if you've got all of those areas that are consistently being spoken about with invaluable one-to-ones, then when it comes to the measure and the reward on the end, then it's done in a very measured, fair way. So I think ultimately for any organization who's thinking about this performance conversation design, to link it to their employee journey, because they might look differently in different organizations. So matching performance conversation design to the employee journey, it's got a start point and an end point, but there's many touch points throughout, I think is a really good place to start.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Lots to chew on there. Um, I suppose if there was one powerful shift you'd love to see in how performance is handled in organizations, Anna, you had your little magic wand and you could waft it somewhere, what would you like to see next?
I I think it has to come. It relates to time, and I know it is something that we're all time short. But I think if organisations could afford managers and employees the time to sit down and have these check-ins, it would be extremely powerful. And see that time as well spent, as opposed to try and shoehorn it in around everything else that takes priority, because they just get pushed and pushed. We're more sophisticated than that, I think. So I think a very powerful shift would be just to give people some time and ring fence it, but give people time to sit down and have valuable performance conversations on an ongoing basis.
Great, thank you. Well, we are all about being strategic. We're all about using the things that really help us. So before we say goodbye, is there a mindset, a phrase, a belief, a sort of a little tool that helps you to stay strategic?
Yes, I do have one. I I hopefully you don't think I'm mad for thinking like this, but I personally I'm very involved as a founder, CEO of a business that I'm very passionate about. I sometimes get really caught up in the tactics and the day-to-day stuff. And in order to be strategic, I need to apply a mindset to help me do that. So I actually learned this through a coaching session that I was having with someone coaching me. That's a technique that I use is that I'm in a beautiful old school London theatre, and the company is the play on the stage. And rather than being in the play, I am sat on the balcony looking down onto that play. So I'm a very visual person, so I quite often will find myself sort of daydreaming or sitting on that balcony looking down at the play, try forcing myself to be objective and strategic in what the next moves are. So yeah, that's my technique for being more strategic.
Wonderful, Anna. That's very much aligned with the dance, getting off the dance floor and onto the balcony, a
Yeah,
strategic mantra that we refer to so much. So thank you for sharing that.
good.
Let's leave our listeners with a little bit of a challenge, something to chew on. So if you're listening to this and you're leading or in a position to be able to influence some kind of performance strategy in your organization, what's the one thing that you will consider after this conversation? Is it a different perspective? Is it something you want to go and investigate or read more about? Something you want to form more of an opinion on? Remembering that we did say to each other, didn't we, Jem, that we would call each other out if we had entrenched opinions. So I think we were quite candid at the beginning that we came to this with opinions, and I think certainly I feel like my strategic viewpoint has been expanded and is more robust. I feel like I will be able to talk about this more intelligently as a result of having had this conversation. How about you?
Absolutely. I think all of the above. And it is very helpful to have some real breadth of perspective. And so I want to echo Fee's thanks to Anna for taking time to join us and sharing your thoughts and your experience and your wealth of knowledge in this area. There's information in the show notes on how to contact Anna or learn more about Open Blend. And if ever you've got any questions, you do know that you can always contact us, and all the information is in the show notes. Thank you so much, Anna. It's been
Thank
a pleasure
you.
to have you. And until next time, stay strategic. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Strategic Leader. We'd love it if you could subscribe or maybe share with a colleague or just leave us a quick review.
And if you have a big, hairy question you'd like us to explore, or perhaps a strategic dilemma you're wrestling with, just drop us a line, gemma@gemmabullivant.co.uk.
And remember, having a strategic viewpoint doesn't necessarily mean having all the answers. It's more about asking better questions, broadening your view, and staying curious.
We'll see you next time.